But the most basic clinic that I've seen is you have physiatry, therapy, and the prosthetist is like the most fundamental. And then everybody's on the same page. You know, they are all saying, okay, therapy, do this, prosthetist, do this, circle back with the physiatrist in 3 months, go. And everybody's on the same page. Patient didn't have to go to 3 separate appointments. And then all the 3, you know, providers didn't have to all talk to each other individually, because that never happens anyways. So an amputee clinic, multidisciplinary clinic, is really ideal for these patients. And then a lot of times they will host a separate bracing clinic. So for all the orthotic patient needs that need new braces or have never had a brace and need a brace, it'll be the same environment. It'll be an orthotist, a therapist, and then a physiatrist. And those are really ideal. In Denver, there's 2 clinics like that. And in Houston, where I did my training, I think I knew of 1. I mean, Houston's a huge city, and there was like 1. So they're not common, but they are awesome when they work really well.
Which is good for people to know, because sometimes people don't understand what good looks like, right? Like perhaps they're not near a big city and they're in the middle of Kansas, you know, and they're like, yeah. I went to the doctor and they told me to get an orthotic, but there's not an orthotist or a prosthetist or, you know, whatever your issue may be, for miles and miles. And so at least if people kind of have an idea of what it should look like, they can go searching, or at least call a clinic somewhere else and be like, hey, what should I do in this scenario? And, you know, if you are somebody who's listening and you have a family member, or you are somebody who needs a prosthetic or an orthotic, it's important that you try to find people who are working very closely with these patients a lot, because again, not a lot of people do specialize in this area, unfortunately. And obviously that continues to grow, but, you know, make sure you're being your own advocate as a patient or a family member of a patient.
Absolutely.
And before, when someone comes into the clinic, perhaps maybe they just had their surgery, they just had they had a limb removed, or perhaps they need an orthotic. Is there preparation that someone should do to put themselves in the best position to get fitted for a device? Should they, similar to other surgeries, should people try to get really, really fit? Should they try to lose weight? Should they try to be as fit as they can before a surgery like that? So that way, when they get out of the surgery, when they come to see you as for an orthotist or get fitted for something, that they're pretty much as ideal as they can be?
I mean, of course, the answer is always yes. It's a weird world though, because, you know, if it's an orthotic patient, usually they have some sort of a degenerative or progressive disease. And so getting fit when you have MS is a weird thing to define, right? It's like as fit as possible, sure. As limber as possible, absolutely. I think that's probably the more common thing is range of motion limitations. Because they can't strengthen these muscles that are weak and diseased. And so it's like, okay, well, try to remain contracture free, meaning don't have any range of motion limitations. That's probably one of the most fundamental things that I'm telling 92% of people that I work with, whether it's an amputee patient or a brace patient. Because if they have an amputated limb, say it's a below the knee amputation, the knee is the next major joint, and that is the one that's most likely to be affected, whether it's by arthritis from overuse or misuse, or suffering from contractures because they're not strengthening and stretching the knee joint. And so that's where, like, there's this nonprofit organization called the Amputee Coalition. They've put together a lot of really good resources. And so I'll always send new patients to the Amputee Coalition website. And they have all these resources about strengthening programs and things like that, but they're geared towards amputees. So here's how you do these adaptive strengthening exercises. Here's how you do these adaptive stretching exercises. And just so people can see those things, and there's usually some really good YouTube videos about it with other amputees, so they can say, oh, that's how I can stretch at home. Great, awesome. The best case scenario is when someone has formal prehab with a therapist. And so if in the rare case that they know they're going to be having an amputation surgery, in like a limb salvage scenario, for example, when somebody has a major traumatic episode, a crush injury, high energy fall or something like that, and really does some damage to the foot and ankle complex or the lower leg, and they've tried multiple reconstructive surgeries, it's ideal to get those people as fit as possible, but a lot of times they're in so much pain, it's just really difficult to do any exercise. And that's why they then go on to amputation, is to get a better quality of life.